first rule for commas is that it joins an independent clause or two independent clauses together when also having a fanboy. A fanboy is a word for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. And then another independent clause. So if you have two independent clauses, you can join them together with a comma and then a fanboy, which is for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Any of those words. So an example of that would just be I was thinking of going to Washington, but I really liked Iowa. So here there's two independent clauses. I was thinking of going to Washington. You could put a period after that and it would be a sentence by itself. And then also here, I really liked Iowa. You could put a period after that, it would be a sentence by itself. So in order to join them together, we need the comma and the fanboy there. Yeah. Rule number 2. Introductory phrases. So whenever you see an introductory phrase, you're going to use a comma. Example of that would be so words that usually create an introductory phrase are after, before, over, during, or a lot of ing words. So words that end in ing. So after 7 hours of studying, comma, I raised my ACT score. So you have this introductory phrase here, after 7 hours of studying. You have your keyword after. So then you need a comma after that, and then I raised my ACT score. Pretty simple. Okay. We're going to go through these pretty quick because I'm kind of assuming that you guys have already seen these before. If you have any questions on any of them, don't be afraid to ask me and just tell me to slow down. Third rule, non-essential phrases. Whenever you see a non-essential phrase, or sometimes they call them by-the-way phrases, you need to hug it with a comma. So they call these by-the-way phrases because example they often use is I am freaking out, comma, by the way, comma, because I have a big test tomorrow. So the non-essential part, it just feels like a lot of times that's something just thrown in there and that you don't actually need it there for the sentence to be whole. If you removed what was between the two commas, the sentence would still make sense by itself. So my brother Ron, comma, an optometrist, comma, owns his own practice. here, a lot of the times this will happen where they have the person and then like what they do for a job. So then you're going to need to hug that part where what they do for a job in commas. So you could read this without what's in between the commas. My brother Ron owns his own practice. That would be a complete sentence. So then we're going to need to hug this part in commas. If it was the other way around though, you wouldn't have commas. So if it said an optometrist, my brother Ron owns his own practice, it wouldn't be worded exactly like that, but or if it said my brother's an optometrist, I don't know. I can find an example later, but if it has the name after what they do, then you're not going to need the commas there. The fourth one, I don't even need to write this one down. Commas separate words in a list. Whenever you have two or more or three or more things in a list, you need commas to separate those. Fifth rule. Okay, so I don't know like specific name that this one has, but in the book they call it the ing thing. Basically, whenever you have an ing phrase kind of at the end of a sentence and it refers to the entire sentence before it, then you're going to need a comma to separate them. So basically the way I like to do this is if you can flip the two parts around the sentence or around the comma, the two parts of the sentence around the comma, and it still makes sense, then you need a comma to separate them. If it doesn't make sense anymore, if it changes the meaning, then you don't need a comma. So an example of this is Mr. Spare offered extra credit to his students, comma, trying to increase their test scores. So you can flip it around, trying to increase their test scores. Mr. Spare offered extra credit to his students. It has the exact same meaning. The sentence still makes complete sense, and then you're going to need the comma there to separate them. Okay. Next rule, commas are always used to separate dates, specifically like the day, and then comma the year, or month, day, comma, year. So you don't need a comma to separate the month and day, but you do need a comma to separate the day and the year, or the month and the year. And then locations. City, comma, state. Those always need a comma. So if I just make up a random day, January 19, comma, 1452. So you need a comma before or after the day and before the year. City, Sioux Falls, comma, South Dakota. You need a comma to separate those. Okay. double check if I'm missing any. Oh, can also use commas to set off quotes. So whenever you're introducing quotes, this is a pretty common one too. Then you can use a comma in front of those. Oh. So 8 would be then whenever you have 2 or more adjectives describing the same noun. So or more. It doesn't just have to be 2. But like in a list, it's 3 or more. But when you're describing something, it only has to be 2. So if you said Mary was a nice, young lady. So these 2 words, nice and young, are both describing Mary or the lady. So then you're going to need a comma to separate them. Double check I'm not missing any more commas. This one you hardly ever see, but it's still a thing. Whenever you're like addressing a person by name, this is usually when they're talking or when there's speech in a text. You use a comma whenever you're addressing someone by name. So if I said like Jack, comma, go get the trash or something. So whenever I'm addressing him or telling someone to do something, you're going to need a comma after you say their name. Okay, those are all the comma rules. We went over them pretty quickly. Are there any questions about those? Okay. Go over semicolons next. Do you guys feel pretty comfortable with punctuation in general? Yeah. Okay. Mixed answers. Okay. There's basically only two uses that I can think of in the book for semicolons. The first one is separate 2 independent clauses. So just like you can separate 2 independent clauses with a period, you can separate 2 independent clauses with a comma and then a fanboy. You can also do it with a semicolon. So you'll have an independent, then a semicolon, and another independent. An example of this would be Steve was the best soccer player in the region, he scored many goals. So here, 2 independent clauses. He scored many goals. Steve was the best soccer player in the region. Those can both be a sentence by themselves. So in order to join them, one way we can do that is by using a semicolon. Okay. Next rule is very similar to this, very similar to the first comma rule we talked about where if you join 2 independent clauses, use a fanboy. If you can join 2 independent clauses with a semicolon, and then it's a different acronym, they call it a THAMO, and then a comma, and then another independent clause. So, THAMO stands for therefore, however, also, moreover, or otherwise. So if you see an independent clause, and I just kind of like to think of these as like more formal transitions, I don't know, like fancier. So if you see an independent clause, and then a THAMO, and then another independent clause, you're going to need both a semicolon and a comma to separate them. So example of that would be I like big trucks, semicolon, however, comma, they are not practical in New York City. So there's 2 independent clauses. I like big trucks, they are not practical in New York City. Join them with a THAMO and a semicolon and a comma. The final use for semicolons is hardly ever seen. If you were to forget one, forget this one. But it's called a super comma. So if there's things in a list already being separated by commas, for example, those things I said earlier, like locations, if you have a city and a state, they already need to be separated by a comma. So if you're listing off multiple locations, then you're going to need to separate those with semicolons. So for example, my brother lived in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, or Sioux Falls, comma, South Dakota, semicolon, Lincoln, comma, Nebraska, semicolon, and Sioux City, comma, Iowa. So when those things are already being separated by a comma, you need to separate them with a semicolon. Next is colons. Basically, colons are just used to introduce a lot of things. So they're used to introduce examples explanations. Or a short phrase. In the book it has all these listed differently. It says like colons list examples, colons have lists, and colons list explanations. When you see a list, a lot of times, I'll give you an example. The teacher had 3 rules in her class. The teacher had 3 rules in her class: sit, be quiet, and do the homework. So you need a colon to introduce that list there. If there's if it's already introduced by a word, you don't need like a colon there. For example, I went to the store and bought apples, popcorn, and milk. Like, you don't need a colon there to introduce the thing. But if you said, I went to the store and bought 3 items, and then you would need a colon to introduce that. So if it doesn't like flow, then you're gonna want a colon to introduce the list. And finally, colons also are used to introduce quotes. So instead of putting a comma before a quote, you can just use a colon. Okay, the final punctuation we'll go over is dashes. And all dashes do is basically the same thing as a comma hug. So when you like hug that non-essential phrase in commas, it's just like that, except it has like a little more emphasis. So it just hugs major breaks or interruptions in a thought. And whenever you see one dash, it'll always be followed by another dash or end in a period. You'll never see a dash and then the phrase ends with a comma or a semicolon or any other punctuation. So it'll always be a dash and then a period. Okay. So I'll just write hug interrupting phrases. Okay. The next thing we'll do for the online students, you should have got in the GroupMe. There was a sheet sent out with 17 questions on it. Don't write on it, just share it. A little punctuation practice. We'll do this. I'll give you like 10 minutes to do this, and then we'll go over the answers. So it should be on the GroupMe. No, just don't. Yeah. For number 8, it doesn't give you options, but just put the punctuation in there. Give another couple minutes. Anyone's still working. Alright, let's go over those answers then. I'll just go around and ask you guys what you got. So, number one, I'll start up here. What'd you get?
The defendant failed to check his rear view mirror before chasing lanes, semicolon. Therefore, comma, he branched a duty owed to the plaintiff.
Yep, perfect. Okay, so the first one there, semicolon, second one's comma. Two, what'd you get, Joe?
There are two kinds of fruit on the table. One. Colon, oranges and apples.
Yep. So there, yep, just a colon. Three.
I have a lot to do today, and then I'd say probably a colon.
Mm-hmm.
Study for my test, comma, do my laundry. Would you put a comma, both lights and darks, and then a semicolon?
So you would put a comma for the for in between both, or do my laundry, comma, both lights and darks, but for the rest of those, you're gonna need the semicolon, cause like,
That's what I said.
yeah, well, so for the first one there, you would also need a semicolon, so it'd be study for my test, semicolon.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, do my laundry, comma, both lights and darks, semicolon,
Okay,
wash the car, semicolon, and call my mom.
I gotcha.
So even though, like, not all of them have commas in between, just because the one does, you're gonna need a semicolon to separate all the rest.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Number four, what'd you get? Yeah.
That came to class breakfast and overwhelmed. Semicolon. They just come from water breakfast.
Yep, perfect. Semicolon there. Alright, Ashling, could you give me what you got for number 5?
The Europe trip will include visits to colon, London, comma, England, semicolon, Rome, comma, Italy, semicolon, Paris, comma, France, semicolon, Munich, comma, Germany, semicolon, and Warsaw, comma, Poland. Warsaw, yeah, comma, Poland.
Yep. The first one you actually don't need punctuation. The very first thing, there doesn't need to be anything there. The Euro trip will include visits to. It flows nicely. You don't need a colon there to introduce that list. Okay, Jack, what'd you get for number 6?
I have no punctuation needed.
Yep, nothing's needed there. Number 7, Cece.
Okay, he was very tired, comma, but he decided to go to class rather than take a nap.
Yep, perfect. Comma for that one. Number 8, Luke.
I said a semicolon.
Where? For number 8?
Before, however, and then a comma after, however. My bad.
Yeah. Yep. So semicolon before however and a comma after however. Number 9, Maeve.
For that one, I had the tables had wonderful decorations, colon, flowers, comma, balloons, comma, confetti, comma, ribbons, comma, and marble birds.
Yep, perfect. Number 10. That was a bad one. the second punctuation should just be another parentheses, and the first one should be a colon. But 11, Maria. Maria, could you do number 11?
All right, sorry about that.
Mhm.
I said the color of the banners are no punctuation, and then blue, red, yellow, and black.
Yep, perfect. Okay, number 12. Oh, Peyton, could you give me that one?
The lunchroom was decorated with no punctuated dated balloons, comma, red, or would it be semicolon, red, comma, yellow, comma, and black streamers, comma, and glow-in-the-dark stars?
Really close. So it'd be first one would be no punctuation. So lunchroom was decorated with balloons, semicolon, red comma, yellow comma, and black streamers, semicolon, and glow in the dark stars. So again, there only one of them had in the list had comma separating stuff, but just because of that, you need semicolons to separate the rest. Okay, 13. Josh.
Okay. The play was excellent, comma, the actors were lively, comma, and the set was phenomenal.
That would work, I think, too. Also, if you said the play was excellent, colon, the actors were lively, no punctuation, and the set was phenomenal, that would also work. It was kind of weirded word, or weird. Okay, 14.
The first book he cited in his paper was Understanding Comics, and then I put comma, the invisible art.
I feel like, okay, this one too,
I feel like
it's a
comma
title,
or
so like,
semicolon.
yeah, a colon, yeah, either would work. That one's a dumb question. 15. Let me get
Her purse held many items, no punctuation, including no punctuation, chopstick money, a cell phone, cough drops, chopsticks, and some pens.
So this should be, her purse included many items, comma, including chapstick, comma, money, a cell phone, cough drops, chopsticks, and some pens. So the reason you need that first comma is because the ing thing we talked about earlier, you could flip it around, it would still make sense. You could say, including chapstick, money, a cell phone, cough drops, chopsticks, and some pens. Her purse included her purse held many items. So you can switch it around, so you're going to need that comma there. Yep. 16. Sam, could you give me that one?
16, it was the 1st of May, comma, all the spring buds on the trees were starting to open.
So this one would actually be a colon. So there those are both independent clauses. It was the 1st of May, that could be a sentence. And all the spring buds on the trees were starting to open. That could also be a sentence. So those are both independent. And then you need to join them with a semicolon. Alright, and the last one, Lucas. Not Luke, Lucas. Can you give me that one? Maybe. Lucas, could you give me the last one? Okay. Raya, could you give me the last one?
Sorry. Would it be it rained heavily during the afternoon, comma, however, comma, we managed to have our picnic anyway.
So you'd actually need a semicolon for the first one, then a comma after. You only do 2 commas around however when there's not 2 independent clauses around it. So here, it rained heavily during the afternoon. That's an independent clause. We managed to have our picnic anyway. That's also an independent clause. So then you need the semicolon, however, comma. Okay. For the last 5 minutes, we'll go ACT 36 book. this one here. Page 69, there's a passage, a sample passage there. Do as much as you can for that, and then we'll,
Which page?
69. This book. And then we'll just end it with that.
Just wants to do the first passage.
It's just sample passage 3 on page 69 there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. After 5 minutes, whatever you guys have done, I'll just see if you have any questions on that. You can check your own answers. Because you shouldn't, I mean, you might finish, but you don't have to. Alrighty. Sorry we didn't have enough time to finish that, but you guys have any questions about the ones you've done or about anything I went over? If not, I will see you guys in a while. Alrighty. Bye.